I started in large institutions, teaching hospitals, trained there, even did what they called an advanced residency from the American Society of Hospital Pharmacists, which changed name. Long and short of it was, I was also California trained PharmD in an era where there weren't too many PharmDs out. So I started on one side of the fence and ended up on the other. So I was a KOL at one time. We didn't call ourselves that at all because I ran Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, and it was one of the largest teaching hospitals in New York. In fact, it's country. All right, the long and short of it. So I think what happened was over the years, industry knew how to shut me up, and the best way to shut me up and stop me from being disruptive, shall we say, to their needs, they had me join. Um, and so back then they called it the dark side, which was really interesting because everyone's on the dark side now. There's no one left in practice. So what that did was that opened up a whole new spectrum for me with all of our training, clinical training, everything else, and knowledge. The one thing we never learned, personnel skills, interpersonal, how do you work with the customer? Because we never really had that thought, because it was always the right answer was the important thing. The patient was the important thing, and it still is. So the long and short of it was, when I joined industry, they trained us. And a lot of what I do now, 32 plus years in, even before retiring, is all based on what I learned the first go around when I first joined. Fascinating. And it was an eye opener. It's like, wow, is that easy to interact with people to get what you want? Um, the long and short of it was, I then was in the industry. I was with SmithKline for some years, and then I went, oh God, then I went to Purdue, and then I went to a few other companies, and I even went back into direct care practice with specialty pharmacy for a short while, and then came back. And throughout all of it, I was always most of the time I was in the field, either as what they called a medical liaison or any other name as it was, and also um, became director more than once, building a couple of teams, some successful, some not successful, but that's part of the game. I mean, that's part of your process. If you're always successful, you're not learning everything. You have to fail or realize there's errors, and there always was in my career. Just that what you do is what you learn from it. You take with you what you learn. And what I used to tell people, and I remember doing my interview days, what is it you do? Everything I've done and taken from where I was before is with me. I don't leave it there because what I do is a sum total of my experience, knowledge, etc. So that's where it all came from. Um, and then I spent my last 6, 7 years with Sanofi and Dupixent, which was a very rewarding time. And now I am now reached the part of my life what we call retired. But what we're doing, as you and I are talking, is I want to give back. And what I learned over the years was the ability to interact with KOLs or thought leaders or anyone else on the side of the desk or where you were, to get them to work with you, to listen to you, and you listen to them and become relationship driven. I was developing relationships unbeknownst to me, without us all knowing what the sequence was later on. I was already doing this where over the years, uh, I still have some docs that I stay in touch with, going close to 20, well, one actually almost, well, we won't say over 30 years. All right. So I must be doing something. And so it wasn't really that I thought much about it. I just had to do my job, do it right. And I always found out that, hey, you're really good at this. And it wasn't until I started building some training and really looking into this. And when I first was asked to join the summits to do this training, and I did it with a few of my smaller companies, that I started realizing, wow, this really is something different. So hopefully I did the right thing in what I said you wanted to know about. I did, and it was two actually. It was interesting because neither one were direct managers, but they were personalities and people who I was still young in either my career or whatever, that I looked up to, and both became mentors to me. One actually, and this is something you learn, title doesn't mean everything. And early on, when I did my residency at Rhode Island Hospital, one of the pharmacists was a BS pharmacist, but one of the most brilliant clinicians I met, and to this day. And so down the earth that right away I took to him, and he took, under his wing, so to speak, and just learn what he does. And it's an eye opener because what it is, you have to keep yourself an open mind. And it's what was one of the early things. Hey, you don't need that advanced degree necessarily to be as good as you are. It may be easier, etc. And we stayed in touch for some years. And then another one was actually when I first became first-time director. It was with Purdue, and I was assigned one of the directors for another division to be my mentor, official, and fantastic person. I mean, to this day, he passed a few years back. Um, so close. He read me like a book, and he was so caring and such a body of knowledge. So that's the person who really started developing the full picture, not just what you produce, but how you do it and how you talk to people and how you get things you want. And just watching him in action. A good deal of those people from around me from other divisions, especially the commercial in the sense when they knew what to do, they knew what to do. They knew how to do it, and they got their work done, and they got their achievements and their deliverables, etc., with always a degree of respect. And that was the other thing. I saw the respect go back from the doc or whoever to them at the same peer level. And
Mm.
so you learn early on there are a lot of nuances that it isn't just what you know, but how do you deliver it? So really what this is, and this is the older term, the stakeholder management, what we call DIPA. In other words, what are you doing? And I think if you look to the right, you're understanding the requirements and rules of relationship. And this is where we talk about now with soft skills. In other words, how do you start building and working with whomever it is you need to meet, whether it's the first time or the continuing or whatever, or you're the beginning, because it's either someone you know you need to know or you should know or whatever. And so, really, to do that, think about it. What is it that you're looking for? What are you trying to do? Understand. And this is where soft skills all comes in. And without getting into great details, so there's all, like they do in other areas, this rules of engagement. What is it that you're going to bring to the table? It's always the scientific exchange. We know that's the basis, but how are you going to do it? Right. And so that goes back to the first one. And you have to demonstrate your ability to add value. What does that mean? Is it just, we used to call spray and pray, right? Where you shoot at everything, hopefully they catch, or you walk in and act like a know-it-all? We'll get to that too. No, but what is it that you can do? So, in other words, it goes back to, and see how it all develops, goes back to the cycle is I have to understand that KOL to some degree to know what it is that they want. What are they looking for in value? Because everyone is different. And those of us who've been around or those who are working experience understand that. You just can't pigeonhole everyone into one spot. Client engagement, that's the actual. So in other words, if you look at the first three, that's your pre-planning. All of that's there. And believe it or not, you have to do that every time. Client engagement and then to develop the relationship. And what does that all come down to? Why you're doing all that, and you bring in the next slide, and that tells you everything, right? As you do all that, it's managing expectation. I think that's the critical piece there. And that drives everything you're doing from the first time you meet them to the very end or whatever, if there is. You're always managing expectation. It's it's the first thing, yes, you realize what your primary purpose is. Let's never forget it. It's that scientific exchange. Does that mean if you're there for a half an hour, it's a 30 minutes of scientific exchange? No, not necessarily. In fact, unless you're with an intensely academic, high-level intellectual who loves to discuss everything under the sun, that's not the case. By the way, I left somebody who I've known for 25 years That would be. I had to block 2 hours of my time because that would be nonstop in between with the other piece. But what is that? It intersperses with building rapport. How do you build rapport? You're a human. They're a human. You got to talk. Just be talk stupid things. The weather. Is there something out there that we can discuss? Traffic. Something going on that we can look at. Look around in their office. What's in there that catches your eye? Look at their, and that's the other thing. That's all part of when we talk about with MSLs and sources. Look around you. Get a feel for the area, get a feel for the gatekeepers, get a feel for the ancillary personnel, get a feel for everyone, because that whole place is one unit. You can't just focus on that one person. So that's part of it. Take a deep breath. It's not easy. Sometimes those offices are sumptuous and gorgeous, and you're walking into Dr. God or Dr. Goddess. It doesn't matter. Um, but you have something to do. What do you have? You have expertise. You have expertise in your area. You know what you're doing. You're trained in this. You're either a portfolio of a certain group or a therapeutic area. You spend your daily activity in life in that with multiple places. So you know it off the top of your head more so than even that expert may, because that is the expert. So you bring the expertise, but they're the expert. Bearing that in mind, you still can develop a peer to peer, but don't be the one that owns it. You don't own that scenario. You're there to be supportive, advocate, to assist, and to provide whatever it is they're looking for that you'll find out. And in doing so, have those little conversations. How's everything going? How's it doing? Uh, you may see a picture on the wall of something you know. Hey, did you do that? Or a school, did you go there? Or, you see a trophy, or if you see the family oriented, you see it's all these pieces that you have to put together to create that human environment. So it's not just what you know, but how you talk. I always tell new MSLs, do not overspeak. Let them tell you. Don't be afraid to tell them, I'm new at this. I'd really love to know what you know. Tell me what it is about the whatever it is, whatever the therapeutic areas, their expertise. Educate me. They love it. You have already brought them into your world without you realizing it. So there's four things I always tell people. What does a KOL expect from you? It's not necessarily what you think. In fact, I work with one of my old colleagues and another KOL, actually in the medical position. That's the first thing he told me, and we agree with. I don't expect you to spit out all your data, tell me everything clinically in our time. I want that, but I want to get to know you. So that's what it's about. They want to know you. They want to know how you, if they can relate and how they relate. Because knowledge and information is disseminated only if the other person is open to hear it. If they shut down or whatever, or it's not what they're looking for, and you don't know it, you're wasted your time, and also possibly started limiting it. So what I'm getting at is four things. And this is what I learned over the years. First of all, it's respect. Give them the respect due. Not just what you think of as a respect to a higher level, like a professor and you're a student respect. Yes, that's part and parcel, but respect to the office setting, respect to the other people in the office or the group that he or she works with, acknowledge their existence, acknowledge their presence, even make sure conversation. The gatekeepers, we used to call them, very clear. They can make or break you. And don't ever do it. And I've seen it. All this I'm talking about is not just myself. I learned this by watching and seeing how others did it wrong. And sometimes I may have done it wrong. And you learn. That's the key. And so that's respect. Respect of them, which will also be the last one, value their time, but we'll talk about that. The other piece is follow up. It doesn't matter if you don't have much to say. And I found this out from in my readings. It's something that actually came from uh, somewhere where they did the value of an MSL and even business virtual. Don't shut them down. Don't hold off. Stay in touch, even if there's not much to say. to let them know you're on top of it, that they are on your presence in your field of importance, to know what's going on. Even if it's just status quo, I'm still working on it, or we're working with this, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks, or whatever. This is important. That shows them that you care, that you're interested in them, and you respect what they want, and you're being just that, their co-pilot to help. Follow through. What does follow through mean? Doesn't mean you're always they're going to get what they want or you're going to win. A win is not necessarily, yay, we got the flag and he's got the study or he's going to do it or whatever, or she. It's the fact that you brought it to some sort of conclusion for that, whatever it was they were looking for. And it doesn't mean that that's the end of the relationship at all. In fact, that can augment it and cement it further if you are willing to say, hey, it didn't work. I'm sorry. This is what happened. Maybe we'll find other ways around it. Because what you should be doing in your background is, if it's some sort of project or initiative they want to do and you're working inside and you're getting sort of negative feedback or alternative feedback, find out what you find out from them. What can I tell them? I don't want to just leave them hanging. Is there somewhere else we can go? And at the same time, you should know enough about that KOL to see, is there another area that I can twist this or tweak it, or that we can bring them to some better fruition. Either way, follow through. And that I've been told over the years, time and time again, from KOLs who I've had relationships with, that's what they hate the most or irritates them the most, is when somebody doesn't follow through. Or and there's where your managing expectation comes in. Don't promise or say something you'll get or do for them when you don't know. You just leave it right clear from the outset. I don't know. I will do my best. Let's find out. Because those are the two things that really burns them and really will cut your relationship short. Is if you don't follow through, or you promise stuff you knew you couldn't do, and it becomes an obvious piece. They'd rather hear the no and see that you're honest and upfront. And again, valuing their time. This is another piece. Don't overstay your welcome. And sometimes the person you're with, or persons, do not realize that you are overstaying your welcome because they're into it. They're having a good conversation. But watch your peripherals. Is the nurse knocking at the door? Doc, you need a patient. Doc, this, or is something happening around them for your institution, or some other thing that's taking their wants to take their attention? Who is in their work of business or their practice? That you have to understand. Remember, you're the guest. They brought you in because they want. Be or don't say, look, I think we got to stop now. Let's revisit. And there you go. You get your chance to see them again. So all of this works hand in hand so that it's never a negative. Never, what does I say? Never sell the farm on the first piece. Just leave them crumbs so they come back. What you're basically doing, it's still the same thing. You go back to those five little balls of this where it was. That's part of the developing the relationship. The relationships are a dynamic and ongoing process. It doesn't stay stagnant and it doesn't stay stable necessarily. It should grow in different ways and shapes and forms, or strengthen or whatever. And that's part of that journey. What is it you're doing? Is this a young and up and comer that you found or someone found that you realize has potential and ability and want to help push them along, so to speak? Because as a manager, that was my whole thing, was developing. And I did it way back before anyone else. I used to say, hey, I'm just the guy sitting on the top uh, riding shotgun so I can get you to where you need to go. Right? So that's really what this is about, too. And so when you're charting the journey, again, you're not owning it. You're seeing how you're helping and assist them in where the appears they want to go. And it comes into all this, and remember we talked about it's all this, we've said active listening. I know we'll get to that. It's all part and parcel. You got to stay open, be able to be adaptable, and understand where they're going with it. Yes, you should know certain aspects. Are they researchers? Do they have research potential? Do they want to do research? Do they want to speak? Do they want to be an advocate? Do they want to work in consensus panels or ad boards or other initiatives they may have? Are they major influences that you need to talk to and need to see? Well, then you work that in that another respect. That's for a whole other discussion. Trust is your foundation. If the KOL doesn't have trust in you, you could forget it. Uh, doesn't mean you won't see them, but you'll never get too much. Trust is a two-part thing. It's a major foundation for strong interpersonal relationships. And it goes beyond just us, but it's very critical for us in the medical world where we are as MSLs of field medical people. And it's interesting as I'll go through what I'll tell you, and then I'll just a little augment it. Got to remember, it's two things. Now, this is where what you know is important, but just as important, the soft skills. You see, they're equal. They're not one is better than the other, because if you don't have one, you can't help. So now you're looking at a combination of your knowledge or your ability to giving your knowledge, but now your interpersonal behaviors as well as your self-awareness. Very important. What does self-awareness mean? No, we're not talking about 20 years of therapy and you're going to get into it and know about this and it's knowing what how you interact with people and how people are interacting with you and how to adapt to the environment because everyone's behaviors can be different. What you're really there is not to confront. That's another thing. Again, I learned the hard way early on because that's where I came from, the world of confrontation, and we win. Um, that's not it. It's how do you get them to where you want them to be without them realizing that you were sort of maneuvering, but you weren't, and yet it was their idea, or at least you were working together. So that's where the self-awareness is. Nowhere, like I said, self-awareness, your surroundings. Is there something going on that you need to stop? Is that person even paying attention or not? And so the elements are they fall into two elements. Expertise and knowledge, there you go. That's your training, that's your background, that's your skill. That's your real what brought you in and what keeps you going. Yet, so you need to be credible, reliable, and responsive. And there's the other piece too. Believe it or not, responsive is both soft and regular. Be responsive. Don't just sit there. And if you don't know something, you tell them, I'm not sure, I'll get back to you. That's fine. No one, there isn't a person out there knows everything, including that expert across the table. Just make sure, as I said, you're following through and following up, right? Okay. Leaving that aside, what's the other one? I know this word's been overused, but it's still real. Emotional intelligence or soft skills. It's being open. It's having those conversations. It's being empathetic, understanding not empathetic, oh, I feel, I understand, but empathetic, understand the environment you're in. Remember what I said in the beginning. You don't own the situation. You have a lot to bring and you have value. You got to show that. How do you do it? What do we know? It's all in a linear pattern or single because that's how it's put together. But we all know it doesn't work that way. It's in a whirling, turning way that everything's going around at once. Just like that other slide earlier, where it's the five that are all going around at once it's there. So we know that it's a lot of interplay. What I'm talking about here is all of that. It's all happening at the same time. You're dispersing knowledge, you're looking empathetic, you're watching your area, you're being adaptable, you're conversing, you're making sure you're staying on cue, that the person's still interested, your time is still yours, that you can still do. Uh, listen, listen. Is there another way avenue going? Did you catch something else you want to remember? All these things. And those of you out there who know this, understand what we do. That 20, 25 minutes, 15, 45, or whatever it was, it can be quite wear and tear. That's a very heavy mental exercise. And that just drains you. It is energy draining. Don't laugh. I mean, people don't realize it's not like it's as if you were there in front of 50 people giving a 45-minute dissertation on pathophysiology and disease state and whatever. It's the same thing because
Mm.
you always want to be. at your 100 or 120%. You always want to be there. You always want to be in there, not just a part of it, but in there so that you're ready and been adaptable. So what is active listening? It's a really critical communication and leadership skill. Believe it or not. And it's funny we talk about it. It really was always there, but it was always in the underlier. Everyone just, whatever. Knowledge is king. That's what he's saying. Well, it is, but you got to watch out for the queen. She could be just as powerful. So that's where this comes in. So to effectively communicate, let's face it, we have to think about not only what we say, but how we say it. That's everything I was saying before, but also how we listen. So much of our communication is about listening to what the other person is saying or not saying. So there's your nonverbal cues and your verbal cues. That's for another piece too within the soft skill. But what does that mean? It's like almost you have to just go, okay, quiet down. Do what you don't want to do and don't laugh. It's like we're all feeling like, okay, I got my cue. I'm listening to him, but I have to say this next, or I have to say that next. That's not active listening. Because what's happening if you're thinking ahead, what you have to say next, you're already not truly hearing what they're saying. You may miss something. So it's almost like you have to go, let's listen. Why? Something that could be said, because you're always looking for opportunities, the areas of relatability, uh, cohesiveness, where you could go with this person or not go. It's the way they bring it up, maybe things they said. There's an interest that you didn't realize, or that we could go down, or something that you may want to bring back inside to talk about. All these little bits and pearls all come from that because you're listening. You're listening also because you may have to realize, all right, this tangent, this direction's not working. Let's go in another direction. And yes, the knowledge is there too, and you have to make sure you're reliable and credible and all that. And there are times you have to do that. So you're going to be judicious. But you got to remember that it is very important to stay open-minded. Open-minded is open your ears. Open ears, listen. Listen for any cue, statement, or nuance, and both verbal and nonverbal. So that's interesting. The ears and the eyes have to work together. Um, so it's a very interesting thing, and I'm going to tell you that was one of the hardest things I had to learn. I'm not going to make any comments because in this world, but just coming from the environment I first did before joining industry, our job was to be correct, to be right. Because if we were wrong, we probably never had another chance. Unfortunately, that's not worked in my world. So what happens is active listening doesn't exist. You, you got to be ready for the next one. That was what a mistake. And you realize that also by active listening, you're doing all the other soft skills. You're being empathetic, you're being caring, you're showing that you care about what they're interested in and what they want, that you're really reactive and receptive. All of these things strengthen relationships and build trust. This is when when we were allowed to go with reps on a regular basis back then. We worked with sales. I remember distinctly this one rep, and I'll never forget him as long as I live. Sweet guy. One of those, and folks, just so you know, in our world that we live, they always go through different ways of training and how, like as Marcus has used so eloquently to do the pitch. There was a time where they all had to go through the sales aid back to front. And some actually followed that. And I'll never forget going with one around with him, and that's what he did. And I'm watching the doc, and you could see every distraction and every annoyance that they're feeling. They're like this, like that, and like this. And I'm looking at the rep, and I'm going, do you not see what's going on here? And it's like, I didn't say a word. I just couldn't believe it when we got out. He says, how do you think it went? I said, are you joking? What do you mean, how do you think it went? You lost him 1 minute in. But I know, but he says, but we're told. I said, I know you're told, but you got to figure something out. That person was no longer interested. You lost them. And you would see this time and time again. And yes, even sales changed. They started loading, learn the behavior, learn the personality, and then they stopped using sales aid in that way, where you just use the points you need to use, etc. It does go back and forth. I'm not going to tell what commercial, I just know that I worked very closely with commercial over the years. But yes, these are things that you learn, right? Or even you as a presenter. Here's a great one for, and I'll leave it. I was brought in at that time. We used to be called the unpaid speakers. Why? We had the same slide decks the speakers did, and the reps didn't have to pay for speakers. Leave it alone as it was. Believe it or not, it was not the Wild and Woolly West. We still had to maintain a degree of compliance, and etc. So I brought in, I did it lunchtime for a local hospital, and the chair was very nice. And he goes, I have to tell you, Dr. Berkowitz, you were, I do that. I think it's fair. Degree in a professional setting. He goes, I have to tell you, your program was really good. You really presented well. You brought in good information, brought us good discussion. But I'm not going to ever ask you back again. And the rep and I going, and this is about 30, 40 docs. Why? Because I only want a physician speak. Start pre-planning. Never, never, never dismiss that or de-emphasize it. Now, someone like myself, people used to go, you don't walk in with anything, or I don't see. I said, don't worry, it's all up here because I've been doing it for so long, or I know this person. You're pre-planning. Pre-planning for the first time, especially, is who is this person? What do they do? What is their background? What are their specialties? Are there awards? Are there research? What is it that makes them stand out? Why are you seeing them? Understand that. I also would recommend, if it's someone you're meeting for the first time and you have a relationship with your representative, the commercial side, find out from them what they know, what they can offer you. You can't hurt. Everything you put together is important for your first meeting. Set it up appropriately, whether it's email, which most part today, I think over the last decade, especially since COVID, everything starts with email. There was a time we used to call offices, but it doesn't, at least from my understanding, that's not the way it works. So the longer you set up a time, another thing, do not ask for an hour. Not the first go around. You don't know where to go. You'd love it. Never do that. Brief period, Doc, or whoever. 15 minutes of your time. I just want to bring in something I think you're interested in. Want to discuss what you're interested in. Want to see what we can, work together and be collaborative. That's all you want. Keep it open-ended, short, brief. Give them enough time in advance. Don't you set the time. Let them set the time at certain dates and you work with your schedule. Remember, you're not in control. You're not the owner. You're there to facilitate and help. So keep that in. So let's say you do that. Be gracious to the person you come in to see, the first person you meet, all of these things. Be cordial. Walk into the office. If you're sitting in an office, beautiful. But I would always walk in and look around. First of all, I look at the office setting itself. Don't laugh. Over the years, a waiting room tells all. The interaction with the waiting room and the staff on the other side of the desk, that tells me everything about how the office is run. And we all know that in an office, the behavior is set by the head, who's probably who you see. So be conversational. How your day? Look it around. Something you can relate to. Is there something here that we can both talk about for a second? How's the weather? Oh, I see you love to do that with your kids, or you've been there. That kind of thing. Then discuss, this is what I hope to set out. I'll be short and sweet. And then open again. Judicious, not voracious. Let them speak. And it's all of that. And and what I've learned over the years, you end up going, all right, let's go over what we did real quick. Or you look at the time, you make sure you keep your time, unless it's really involved and everything is good and it's quiet and he always asks, is it all right? Can we keep going? And you then go, this is what we're going to do next. I'll get back to you. When do you want me to get back to you? Get some sort of time frame. Doesn't have to be an absolute, but always have something tangible to work in, and then respond to them afterwards. Sometimes you may say a thank you. A lot of times you're going to have to send an email because it's something they wanted or needed and you're going back to get. There's your communication. And always be that way and stay regularly communicating. Whether it's once a month, whatever, it's your determination based on everything. Stay in contact. Even if there's nothing new to say, stay in contact. And then as time goes on, the relationship builds. There's information you provided that was effective and what they wanted or needed. Maybe there's an initiative you're working with. Maybe they're getting involved with the research for you or an ad board, any number of things that sort of cement that relationship. And remember, every time it's conversation and work, conversation and work. And it depends how it goes. I mean, at this point, I have a handful of relationships that go back 30 years, as up more than 30. Actually, one is 40, but we won't go there. Uh, we were both kids at the time. He was a young attending. Anyway, so it all depends. I mean, and sometimes some do stop. I mean, you have to understand, you're not going to have an evolving long term with everybody, but you decide which are. And again, it's coming back to the needs of your corporation, the needs of your portfolio, the needs of your therapeutic area, the needs of your company, sorry, that you want to do. So it can evolve to the point where you're good friends, your wife's meet, your family, your spouses, whatever, your significant others. It all depends. But and how do you know it's working? This is important. I'm sorry, Chibber. How do you know your relationship's working right? Are they coming back to you unsolicited? Are you getting emails or a call? Hey, I got this question. Or when are we going to see each other again? Or at a meeting, are you going to such and such? Are you going to be there? I want to see you. Those are the type of things that you know you've cemented enough of a foundation to your relationship, you're only going to springboard further. If they're asking or they're relying or they're asking you to come back or they're happy to see you to come back or they're willing or they're contacting you unsolicited, you got it. There's your relationship.